Hello and welcome to Talking Africa, the latest in a brand new series here on Arise News, a special weekly edition of Africa Wrap, where we take time to reflect on the fortunes and affairs of the emerging continent within its own countries and across the world in an hour of conversation with African commentators and thought leaders. 2015 now stretches before Africa as a year of challenge and opportunity, both economically and politically. So what can we expect this year to bring? I'm joined on today's program by some leading analysts who can help us to speculate. My first guest is Prince Tonye Princewill, a politician, a businessman, and for many people, one of Nigeria's most inspiring young public figures. Thank you for joining us, complete with your crystal ball there, at least an excellent background to make some educated guesses about the decade ahead for Nigeria. First, though, let's talk about you and your life, the path that's led you to where you are now. You were born in the UK, and you started school here, but then you left England in your early childhood because your parents decided to return to Nigeria. What was the reason for that?
Well, my father was studying in the University of Leeds, and he had gotten his doctorate, and mission accomplished. It was time for him to go back. I mean, naturally, this was a progression. He's finished he was here on scholarship. He'd gotten his degree, so he was going back. He had been in the northern part of Nigeria, where he got his scholarship. So he was returning back to the northern part of Nigeria. So, of course, I went back, and that was the first experience of Nigeria I had, which is, of course, the northern part, Jos to be precise.
Right. And, of course, how old were you then?
I was 7 years old.
Right. And how did the transition between two different cultures feel for you personally in the mid-1970s? I mean, what is it that you remember most vividly? What stands out for you?
Well, it was funny because I was the last of my mother. My mother had 5 children before me. My father had none, so my father and mother married. She was divorced with 5 kids, and my father married her. So I was the first of my father, but the last of my mother. So I knew I had siblings. But here in the UK, we were alone. It was just me and them. And so going back, I was excited that I'd be going back to my siblings, but also there was this uncertainty. My schoolmates were telling me I was going back to the jungle, and I had this picture of, a plane going back and landing in some bush somewhere with monkeys jumping off the tree. So that stereotypical picture, unfortunately, was the one I had, but I was pleasantly surprised that I went back to a very well-developed system. Of course, it wasn't as developed as here, but it was definitely not as underdeveloped as I thought it would be.
And of course, not only did you go back to that pseudo-developed system, I mean, your father made the transition from being a professor of medical microbiology to becoming a monarch.
Correct.
So you suddenly had to deal with not just a new culture, but the fact that you were now a prince.
Well, yes, but for me, the prince tag has never been some kind of privilege arrangement. It's always been more like a duty, more a responsibility. You
were sort of yoked down in traditions.
Absolutely. I mean, traditionally, I'd rather be on Waikiki Beach sipping on a pina colada. But the responsibilities that come with being the son of a king is that you do have to dig down deep and get to work. So, yes, the transition from microbiologist to monarch was a sudden realization of that responsibility, but it always been there. He was a prince. His father was a king before him.
So he knew that at some point he would have to take up that responsibility.
Yeah, we always knew that that responsibility was there. So even before the formal transition took place, we'd already at least had the mental transition anyway.
So when you look at, Prince Charles and the royalty here in England, you sort of have a nod of understanding, do you?
We do. The only difference, of course, is that there's a lot more pomp and pageantry about this than there is about ours. But we understand the all eyes on you scenario and responsibilities that you have to behold.
So you went through high school and university in Nigeria, but then you returned to London to continue your education in petroleum engineering. What was it about that field that ignited your interest?
Well, it was, I came here to do a master's in Imperial College from Mineral Resources Engineering. I'd done a first degree in petroleum engineering, but I felt that there was still a lot I needed to learn. I'd always wanted to come back I always felt that I needed to be, whatever I was doing, I wanted to be the best at it internationally, not just in a local context. So coming back here, getting my master's in Imperial College for me was more like validification, you know, that this is, yes, I've arrived. And so I came back and did that. But petroleum engineering is, you've got to understand that where I'm from in Rivers State is like...
That's, of course, the Niger Delta, isn't it?
It's where all the oil production is taking place. So you can't look to your left or right without seeing either the benefits or the sadness that oil production brings. So getting involved in the industry to me was really just a natural progression.
Well, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, perhaps in the next segment, about your assessment of the Niger Delta and all the issues there. But you were already an accomplished businessman. You diversified beyond oil and you developed a keen interest in information technology. Tell us why.
Well, if I'm going to sugarcoat it, I'd say I was diversifying just for the sake of it. But the truth of the matter was it was money. When I was in the UK, petroleum engineering and mineral resources engineering was fantastic. But I looked at the people who had been working in the oil industry for 10, 15, 20 years, and I wasn't inspired. And then it came through to me that information technology was an area where we could truly develop ourselves. A friend of mine had diversified into information technology, and I saw him making a good ton of money, and I was quite impressed by it. And so I took a peek, and I liked what I saw, so I moved into information technology. So that sort of history of my career, moving from petroleum engineering to information technology, and eventually to project management, was mainly because I always wanted to spread my wings. If the oil industry wasn't doing too well, like, for instance, now, then the information technology industry was always there. And if that wasn't doing well, then of course we had project management as well.
And of course you moved from all of that into politics.
I did, and there's a reason for that. There's a phrase I use, and I use it often. I borrowed it from Charles de Gaulle back in the days when he said, war is too important to be left to generals. Mine is politics is too important to be left to politicians. I'm not a traditional politician by any stretch of the imagination. But I've discovered that in a place like Nigeria, politics affects the people more than anything else. It's not like the UK, where you wouldn't worry too much if it's a Labour government or a Conservative government, because frankly speaking, they would both be interested in the people and they would find some way of making sure that they got re-elected. So they would try to please the people, because people's votes counted. In Nigeria, it's a completely different set of circumstances. The politics is not taking care of the people, and I thought to myself, complaining would not make any sense. The real trigger was in 2003. There was a major crisis in my community, and it was caused by the politicians. And I had to sort of jump in to try to resolve the issues. And when I tried to do that, all the politicians ran for cover. There was no one to help me. So I asked myself, if I have to get involved and keep doing this thing, I might as well be taking the responsibility for it, formally, so to speak. And so that was my first entry into politics, purely because of crisis.
And that gets us naturally to the next segments. There's much more to come from Prince Tonye Princewill very soon here on Talking Africa. We're turning this conversation towards Nigeria's election, and we're back to do that in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Talking Africa here on Arise News. With me, the leading Nigerian politician and businessman, Prince Tonye Princewill. Before the break, we learned much about him. Now we want to his take on his country's general election, an election that's just weeks away. But first of all, let's just talk about how you got into this point, because there was a bit of a bumpy start, wasn't there, for you? As you were a losing candidate for the Rivers State governorship in 2007. That led you to launch a legal challenge questioning the fairness of the election. I mean, did that introduce you to the sort of knuckle and punches politics in Nigeria?
Well, yes, but I've got to be honest with you. I look at the politics of Nigeria, and it's very predictable. I describe it more as an analog type of politics. It's not very digital in its take. You can stand in one point and you can predict what will come out from the other point. So as much as it was unpleasant, I felt it was necessary. We can't improve the politics without changing the players. If we keep on with the same players, then we end up with the same outcome.
So rather than discourage you, it gave you more impetus?
Absolutely. I'm still here. I'm still here. In fact, many politicians say to me, they say, what you've achieved in a few short years of politics really dwarfs what most of us have achieved. And so I think within the short period I've been in politics, I'm quite satisfied about the outcome. Having said that, of course, there's room for improvement, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to make sure that things happen differently.
There's no question that it's been quite a battle there, because, I mean, you were part of all those disputes and argumentations and, you know, quarrels and fights within the ruling People's Democratic Party, and you're now in the Labour Party. You've moved away from the party, and you're in a new sort of, if you like, party. What was it that made you that turned you off the PDP? I mean, here was a winning party that has been in power for 16 years. Nobody seemed able to challenge it, and yet you moved away from that party.
No, it's the perspective or the context for my decision was not purely about winning or losing. It was, for me, more about right versus wrong. I'm in the Labour Party now. I'm very comfortable. It's a party that has basic ideals. One of the biggest problems we have in Nigerian politics is that the parties lack ideology. Here in the UK, if you have a candidate coming from the Conservative Party, you pretty much have an idea of his position on immigration and a host of other issues. But in Nigeria, the People's Democratic Party and the All Progressive Congress Party don't seem to have any defined ideology. That's why moving between parties in Nigeria is not such a big deal, because the ideologies of the individuals can fit into any of the political parties. Now, with the Labour Party, it's slightly different. I'm not in any way saying that they're the most robust, you know, this side of the Niger River, but I can tell you that they're a lot more ideological than others, and I feel a lot more comfortable. Now, having said that, the reason I moved away from the PDP simply was because they refused a fair contest. And you know, in politics, what you expect is to play by certain rules. And it's not helpful if the goalpost keeps changing and moving all the time.
But of course, the Labour Party is like a sort of third way now, isn't it? Because, I mean, everybody's focusing on the two main parties, the ruling PDP and the opposition APC. You're sort of like the Liberal Democrats here in the UK. I mean, you've indicated that you're interested in succeeding Rotimi Amechi, who's the current governor in Rivers State this year. I mean, how is that campaign going? Do you really think you're putting up a credible challenge there?
Of course. I think for me, it's more along the lines of campaigning is not just, shouldn't just be an event, it should be a process. And I want to think that since 2007, when I contested for the first time, I've been somewhat quiet as far as politicians are concerned, but as far as the people are concerned, I haven't. I've been working very hard at the grassroots level, bringing peace to communities, making sure that, you know, we have some sense of what the people want. I've conducted the surveys. I've done a baseline survey of the whole state, going around from community to community, asking them key important questions. What do they like about this government? What would they like to see done differently? And I produced a document which many people are saying is historic, because no politician actually goes around asking the people what they want.
So what are the issues? What are the issues that you think will connect you to the electorate?
Well, the most important thing is that a manifesto that any serious politician is putting to the people has to reflect their wishes. But none of these people are asking the people what they want. So I have. And the most important thing, which continues to come back, it's a recurring decimal, is the lack of employment. So for me, we have here, for instance, people talking about education being priority, education, 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 we used to hear in the days. For me, it's job creation. Job creation is the key priority. Most people need a job. Some have it, they want to change it. Some can't even find one in the first place. Now, if I focus on job creation as my one-point agenda, I know it will make a huge difference in the state.
But it's not like you can wave a magic wand and create jobs, particularly in a one-crop economy like Nigeria, where there's been very little diversification. How are you going to do that?
Well, you've just hit the nail on the head. There's very little diversification, so there needs to be more diversification. We need to go into agriculture. We need to look at infrastructural development. We need to talk about what are the main issues affecting business. Problem we have is that most of the politicians don't understand the language of business. If you go to the average business in the state, they'll tell you that one of the major issues they have is multiple taxation. But the largest single, most significant issue they have is access to affordable capital. So they're businesses that want to do well, that are doing well, that could do a lot better if they got some government support. They're not getting it.
Yeah, but the fact is that, yes, that joblessness is obviously a problem. But
of course,
for Nigerians, they would place that third. They'd say the first two things are insecurity and corruption.
Well, I think that if you can address jobs, if you can focus on jobs, you see, a government in Nigeria tends to shy away from the responsibility of job creation. If you look at employment figures in the UK, or you look at unemployment figures in the US, the government takes responsibility for them. But it's not the government doing the employing. The government is only creating the environment by which employment should take place. So what needs to happen for people like me is to make sure that we create the environment for that to happen. And of course, in creating the environment, corruption and insecurity will automatically be addressed. But I would rather address corruption and insecurity in the manner in which I end up creating jobs. Because we've got to be tough on these crimes, but we also have to be tough on the causes of these crimes. And one of the reasons why people are so, let me use the word, accepting of corruption is that they're hungry. So you're starving and someone comes along with breadcrumbs for you. You're not going to be asking him where he got the breadcrumbs from. You're going to be taking it. You're going to be snapping it out of his hand. But if you've got a decent living and someone comes around flashing the cash, you're going to say, hey, hang on, what are you doing there? Where did you get that money from? So there's a lot of hunger, there's a lot of poverty in the land, and it's clouding people's judgment. If we can get people jobs, we can slowly lift them and lift their dignity. And I think then they'll start to look, just as we are now, looking at corrupt officials and confronting them with their corruption, they will be doing so too.
Now, you've earned the nickname, the digital politician, which obviously connects with your passion for modern technology, but also your advocacy for open government.
Correct. I mean, it's very important. The only way we can achieve any kind of result is if we start to put our leaders under scrutiny. They're not asking the leaders any questions. And I don't agree with that. I believe that leaders should be asked questions. If you look at my history, you'll see that in 2007, I contested for the office of governor. I worked a unity government in the end with the PDP government at the time, Rotimi Amechi. And throughout that period, I was one of his fiercest critics. So I was working with him, but I was criticizing him. And I was saying to him that this needed to be done right. The first criticism that came from me to him was when he said all militants were criminals. And I explained to him that they, the politicians, were the ones that armed these people. So if those people were criminals, then the politicians were
militants in the Niger Delta.
Absolutely. So you've got to, we're not in politics to make friends. We're in politics to serve the people. And if in the process of serving the people we have to ruffle a few feathers, then so be it. And that's the kind of leadership that we need, and that's the kind of leadership that I'd like to deliver. Okay, stay with us. Much more to come from Prince Tonye Princewill very soon here on Talking Africa. We next consider the decade ahead for Nigeria. Stay with us.
The best way to predict the future is to create it.
There's a special breed of achievers out there that are called tomorrow's people, the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They're bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow strive for and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
Welcome back to Talking Africa here on Arise News. With me, the leading Nigerian politician and businessman, Prince Tonye Princewill. We've already learned much about him and his thoughts on this spring's general election in Nigeria. Now we're looking to the future. What do the next 10 years hold in store for Africa's biggest economy? Thank you again for rejoining us. You've been a leading advocate of empowerment for young people as well as women in rural areas of Nigeria. What was it that triggered your involvement in that type of public-spirited work, if you like?
Well, my politics has always been grassroots focused. I've always felt that we needed to leave the elite. The elite are okay. They're doing pretty well for themselves, but the people at the bottom are having a rough ride. And so most of my politics has been engaged at that level. And so I'm confronted with the poverty, I'm confronted with the health issues, the poor education, you name it. And so on a day-to-day basis, I'm having to confront these issues. And, you know, you might have heard of the Princewill's Trust, which is a charity I set up.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about the initiatives that you have actually launched to help Nigerians.
Yes. So here you are helping this person here and helping that person there. And it's all, you know, scattered. And so what I felt really was create some kind of a funnel through which you can channel this goodwill, and hopefully other people will come to that and then see that there's some kind of expertise on the ground and work with it. So I'm fed up of picking up the pieces. I'd rather get a government to do that. But in the process of the government doing it, then we have to pick up those people who fall through those gaps.
Do you think the government of President Jonathan has made any difference at all in this direction?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's no saying that they're not areas for improvement. There are lots of areas for improvement. I didn't expect much from him. I've got to be honest with you. I was not one of those people who was running around the place screaming that he had no shoes and therefore he should be given the position. I was a critic. But I've got to be honest with you that over the years, in spite of the insecurity, in spite of the political distractions that he's had and received, I'm impressed. I think he's done pretty well. But the tide is against him. Nigerians are a lot more aware. What they would have settled for before, they would no longer settle for. So he's going to be feeling the heat, and rightly so.
And do you think the APC candidate, I mean, your party doesn't actually have a presidential candidate, does it?
No, but I'm not one of those people who runs around the place screaming my party is supreme. For me, the people are supreme. And if my party isn't serving the will of my people, as I've demonstrated with the PDP, then on your bike, mate, as they say. So for me, it's not that. But I look at the candidates, Buhari, and I look at Goodluck Jonathan, and I'm able to assess them dispassionately, in spite of party affiliations. And I've got to be honest with you that anyone who thinks that Buhari is going to come and change things or make things better must be living in some kind of planet. I'm not too sure which one it is, because he's surrounded by pretty similar people to who Goodluck is surrounded by. So it really comes down to the individual. And I think on that point, Jonathan wins any day.
Right. Now, of course, Nigeria is just moving away from politics, which we've talked about considerably here. Nigeria is an emerging mixed economy. It's the second largest, well, it's now actually the largest economy in Africa. It has the highest population of any African nation, and it boasts an abundant supply of natural resources. You will know, I mean, you know that from your oil, your information technology interests and that sort of thing. How far has the country moved forward, given all these resources, since the end of military rule 16 years ago, particularly in the Niger Delta, where you're from?
Well, I think there's been slow progress. There's no doubt that our biggest problem in Nigeria is our politics. I think that we've got, beyond the natural resources, one of the biggest resources we have are the people. I think we have Nigerians, not just within Nigeria, but all over the world, who are exceptional. If we can just get the right kind of political leadership, we can harness all of that resource. So I think Nigeria is a very blessed country. But there's no doubt that anyone who's a progressive will know that it's not just where you are, it's where you could have been. And we are far, far, far away from where we should have been. As a country, Nigeria is not doing too badly, but the world is moving as well. And with a very fast, very quick changing world, Nigeria can't afford to be in the slow lane.
So what should Nigeria be focusing on achieving in the next 10 years? I know you've talked about job creation, but there's also infrastructure. There is the lack of institutions. I mean, the problems with the police, with the army, there's so many things. And that's what President Jonathan says, that he's inherited 40-something years of maladministration in Nigeria, and he can't wave a magic wand and end it all in 4 years.
No, you can't. But you see, the beginning of the solution is leadership. That's the beginning of the solution. And leadership comes from our politics. For some strange reason, democracy is the best option. Aside from dictatorship, there's nothing else we can do. We need a democracy. And the only way you can move a country forward is by the leadership. The leadership provides the vision, and then they articulate that vision and people vote for them. Now, unless we can get our party politics right, I'm afraid you and I will be having this conversation even when we're grey and old. And we need to get that right. And that's why the best thing anyone can do for Nigeria is pray for right leadership. And it's not just pray and go down on your knees and pray. We need to work for it as well. That's what I'm doing.
Right. Now,
I believe that we need to define a different type of leadership, which means that we must insist on internal democracy within political parties. That would be a good start.
Now, if Nigeria gets the sort of leadership that you're talking about, what are the key areas where you think the country can excel, not just in Africa as a continent, but on a global platform?
Well, I've got to be honest with you. Call me biased, but I think there's no area where Nigeria cannot do well. Whether it's been science, whether it's been the arts. I'm an engineer by training, but many people will know that I'm also a movie producer and a music producer. I get involved with the youth because I want to get them from where they are to where they need to be. So whatever I have to do to get involved, I am. And I've seen some of the most amazing talents, from dancers to musicians to actors. Nigeria has it all. So I wouldn't want us to limit ourselves and say we're focusing on this or we're focusing on that. We need to diversify our economy, primarily. That's very important. But honestly, we need to be looking at all sectors and seeing how we can make little bits of gains here and little bits of gains there.
And you're convinced that you will play your part in driving forward change and empowerment for Nigerians as a politician?
Yes, because I have a choice. I don't have to be there. I'm there simply because I want to be there. And so as long as you have a choice, it's good because you're coming to the political space with something. You're bringing something to the political space. It's not like an individual saying, I want to create jobs, but they've never created jobs before. And I have. I've done that. And I have people who are working in the North Sea, exported from Nigeria. So I know what it is. I know how to create jobs. And of course, I'm coming to the political space to make my contribution to move my country forward.
Prince, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you as well.
Well, my thanks to Prince Tonye Princewill today for joining us on Talking Africa here on Arise News. After the break, more guests, more analysis, and maybe some fireworks too, as we look back at the week in Africa. Stay with us.